Imagine every eye in a packed university auditorium snapping toward the stage. As two uniformed officers burst in, metal cuffs glinting under fluorescent lights. The mid-lecture hush shatters with a single bark. "Step away from the podium, ma'am." What follows is a moment frozen in disbelief, phones raised, jaws dropping. A warm brown-skinned woman in a tailored navy blazer, suddenly shackled in front of hundreds of students. This isn't a routine campus disturbance. It's a trap meticulously laid by corrupt officers who believe they've cornered an easy target. They have no idea they've just handcuffed a single person who can bring their whole operation crashing down. Just after the clock on the back wall ticks past 12:14 p.m., sunlight flickers through half-lowered blinds, casting long shadows across red-cushioned seats. Naomi Fields, calm and intelligent, had been dissecting the very topic of racial bias in law enforcement when her world tilted. Tall and poised at 43, she stood with hands resting lightly on a wooden podium, her only adornment, a simple silver watch. Her voice had been measured, each word chosen with care until the moment the taller officer, broad-shouldered and stern, read her rights aloud. A ripple of confusion swept through the room as Naomi, a guest lecturer, they assumed refused to step down without an explanation. What they didn't know, what no one in that hall could have guessed, was that Naomi Fields isn't just another academic. Behind the poised exterior and the incisive lecture style lies the Deputy Director of the Department of Justice's Internal Affairs Division, and undercover boss operating in plain sight. These officers, cloaked in badge and uniform, had unknowingly arrested the most dangerous adversary they could face. As the cuffs clicked shut around her wrist, Naomi's mind shifted into overdrive, calculating every implication, the cameras rolling, the students whirling phones toward her. The public spectacle about to explode on social feeds, their mistake, would be their downfall, but first she had to play along, gathering every fragment of evidence. In the chapters ahead, you'll follow Naomi's journey from stunned detainee to strategic powerhouse. We'll descend with her from the stage to a sweltering patrol car, witness the stale coffee haze of the Bridgeport Police Department lobby, and feel the tension crackle in interview rooms, where her secret identity teeters on the brink of exposure. You'll ride alongside her as she refuses coerced plea deals, leverages a sealed clearance that freezes sworn officers in their tracks, and delivers a quiet ultimatum that sends shockwaves through precinct walls. Finally, you'll see her step before the nation's press corps, transforming from the story to the reckoning itself. Stay with us, because when a hidden director takes charge, no secret survives the light. Hit like if you've ever felt underestimated. Share your thoughts in the comments, and prepare for a 3-part descent and resurgence that turns every expectation upside down. This is only the beginning. Lecture hall disruption. It was just past noon when the doors at the back of Morrison University's lecture hall slammed open with a metallic thud that echoed off red-cushioned seats. A shaft of sunlight cut through half-lowered blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing above hundreds of students. At first, heads turned casually, as if this sudden intrusion were part of the day's routine. Then Officer Dunlap's voice cracked the silence. "Step away from the podium, ma'am." Broad-shouldered and stern, he advanced on Naomi Fields, whose hands rested lightly on the polished oak. Behind him, tore as a younger, sweat-beaded officer hesitated, uncertainty flashing in his eyes. In an instant, the room transformed from an academic sanctuary into a stage for spectacle. Phones flickered to life like synchronized stars, capturing every angle. Some students leaned forward in alarm, others whispered in stunned disbelief, and faculty members froze mid-stride. Naomi's calm aura, honed by years navigating high-stakes corridors of power, never wavered. Tall, poised, dressed in a cream-colored blouse and tailored navy blazer, she looked every bit the composed scholar until that bark of arrest shattered the moment. The contrast between her serene presence and the officer's abrupt aggression magnified every gasp, every click of a recording device. In that charged atmosphere, everyone wondered, what have they done? First shockwave. The click of steel on steel was like a gunshot filmed in slow motion. As Dunlap snapped the metal cuffs around Naomi's wrist, a collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. The cuffs pinched both fabric and flesh, eliciting a muted wince, yet Naomi remained unflinching. Her jaw tightened fractionally, but her shoulders stayed square against the public spectacle. Phones captured her silhouette against the podium's warm glow, the proud set of her spine, the flash of silver from her watch, the glint of confusion in the student's wide eyes. Even as Torres pulled her arms behind her back, the young officer's trembling grip betrayed his nerves. Naomi felt the familiar sting of injustice not as a concept, but as a physical weight. Yet beneath the sting, her mind raced, every flashbulb Every whispered question, every stunned pause fed into her internal calculus. This would go viral in seconds. She would be painted as just another black woman unjustly targeted. But in reality, these officers had no idea who they'd just arrested. She wasn't merely a guest lecturer. She was Deputy Director Naomi Fields of the DOJ's Internal Affairs Division, and slowly, deliberately, she began to gather the data she would need to engineer their unraveling. En route to the station, the patrol car's engine rumbled to life, and Naomi slid into the back seat with cautious grace, ducking to avoid smashing her head against the plastic partition. The interior smelled of stale vinyl and the faint tang of sweat. Dunlap eased into the driver's seat, exhaling a smug, self-satisfied breath. Crazy how easy that was, he muttered, glancing in the rearview mirror. Beside him, Torres clutched a small plastic bag containing a faint trace of white powder, their fabricated evidence. Naomi's gaze never left the pouch. In that claustrophobic space, every detail mattered. The way Torres's finger trembled on the seal, the precise angle of the bag in his grip, the beat of her own heart matching the engine's growl. Outside the window, campus landmarks blurred, past coffee shops bustling with unaware patrons, students craning their necks to witness the spectacle. Cameras rolled from every angle, but inside the car, a heavy silence reigned. Naomi's breathing stayed even as the weight of the cuffs dug into her wrist. She let Dunlap and Torres bask in their perceived victory, storing each nuance in her mind. If they believed they'd nabbed an easy suspect, they had gravely underestimated who she was and what she could unleash once free. Arrival at Bridgeport PD **. The precinct's beige brick facade loomed ahead, 3 stories high. Beneath a faded blue awning, neon lights buzzed above the entrance as the patrol car coasted to a stop on gravel. Naomi stepped out, wrist cuffed, and was ushered inside. The lobby smelled of stale coffee and cleaning solution. Fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead. A receptionist barely glanced up, and an officer leaned against the counter, chuckling at something on his phone. The atmosphere reeked of routine wrongful arrest whispered about then filed away. Rarely questioned, Naomi's boots clicked on scuffed tile as she approached the intake desk, where a bored officer with thinning hair gestured to a stack of paperwork. Leaning in, she asked quietly, "You didn't check my ID." He didn't look up. "We will. Once you're in the system," he mumbled. Dunlap snickered. Some college types think they're clever. Yet when the officer typed Naomi Fields into the database, his fingers froze and his brows whereupon in confusion. Torres's smirk faded, and Dunlap's confident stance wavered. Naomi watched them, the seed of doubt she planted taking root. In that flat, indifferent lobby, the first cracks were appearing in the narrative they built. Captain's entrance and first pivot footsteps echoed as Captain Mason entered, crisp uniform unwrinkled, face hardened by years of carrying others' burdens. His square jaw tightened when his eyes fell on Naomi. For a heartbeat, the entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Naomi met his gaze without blinking, her own calm and wavering. The intake officer glanced between them, unsure whether to speak or vanish. Mason's eyes flicked to Dunlap, then Torres, and back to Naomi's name on the screen. "Something about this doesn't add up," he murmured, the spark of suspicion lighting in his gaze. At that precise moment, Naomi knew the pivot had arrived. The handcuffs that had felt like restraints on stage were now the first links in a chain she would soon pull to unravel their corruption. As Captain Mason's words faded into the hum of the precinct, one truth became clear. The setup that began on the podium was about to backfire spectacularly. Holding cell silence **. The metal door clanged shut behind Naomi, sealing her in a dimly lit holding cell that smelled of disinfectant and stale air. 2 women sat huddled in opposite corners, one perched against the wall, arms wrapped protectively around her knees. The other sprawled on the floor, face buried in her arm as if trying to disappear. Their survival hush was thick, a language Naomi instantly recognized. Speak only when spoken to. Anything else could be used against you. Naomi settled onto the narrow metal bench, spine flush against the cold cinder block wall. She crossed her ankles, let her hands rest palm up on her thighs. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed with mechanical indifference. Time stretched as she closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to steady her mind. Every minute in that cell felt like a countdown, each tick of her internal clock, echoing the broader stakes outside. Alone, yet hyper-aware, she cataloged details. The faint hum beneath the door, the stale residue on the floor tiles, the whispered floor plan of the precinct she had once audited. Waiting was its own kind of interrogation. Every second tested patience, resolve, and mental clarity. But Naomi had been forged in tougher crucibles. She inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, and reminded herself that this silence was merely the prelude to a greater revelation. Unexpected visitor after what felt like an eternity. A young officer's clipped footsteps approached. He paused, cleared his throat, and called out in a tone far more respectful than she'd heard from Dunlap or Torres, "Fields, your visitors here." At his side hung a clipboard, badge glinting subtly against freshly pressed uniform. This was not the same swaggering precinct guard from before. His posture was uncertain, deferential an acknowledgement that protocols had been bent. Naomi rose deliberately, cuffs clinking once as she stood. She allowed herself a small, measured nod before following him down the narrow corridor lined with faded photographs of former captains. The change in atmosphere was palpable. Officers glanced up only to look away, a whispered undercurrent of curiosity rippling through the station. Naomi's mind shifted gears. She was no longer a detainee in freefall, but an observer on hostile turf. Each glance, each passerby's hesitation, became data points in her mental dossier. Unshackled from immediate panic, she slipped into her hidden authority mode, listening, watching, calculating every nuance that would fuel the coming investigation. Interview room showdown. The door to interview room swung open, and Naomi stepped inside with deliberate poise. A man in a rumpled tan suit sat behind a steel table, a manila folder open before him. "Miss Fields," he began, voice measured, "I'm David Keller, your court-appointed counsel for now. You've been charged with possession of a controlled substance. If we're realistic, working a deal first-time offender. Spotless record might be our best path." Naomi sank into the plastic chair, wrists still cuffed before her. She studied Keller, the cheap fabric of his jacket, the faint stain at his cuff, the practiced earnestness that often preceded disappointment. "Those drugs weren't mine," she said softly, voice laced with calm steel. Keller leaned in, brow furrowing. "Look, I'm not here to judge, but negotiating could avoid years behind bars." "I'm not here to please you," Naomi replied, gaze unwavering. "I'm here to expose them." The tension between strategy and principle crackled in the stale air. Keller closed the folder with a sigh, the faint echo of authority running against self-preservation. His next words stumbled. "You realize this goes to trial, right?" Naomi's nod was almost imperceptible. "If it does, I'll walk the courthouse floors with my head held high." The walls of the room seemed to shrink around him as he absorbed the implication. This was no ordinary defendant, and these were no ordinary allegations. Database revelation. A soft knock heralded Captain Mason's entrance, file in hand, eyes shadowed with growing disbelief. He glanced first at Naomi, then at Keller, and nodded toward the officer by the door. With a curt gesture, he motioned for the database readout on the laptop. The intake officer hesitated before pulling up a secure channel Homeland interface. Fingers trembling slightly, he typed Naomi's name a second time. The screen flickered, then displayed a sealed clearance level and job title that none in this room were authorized to view: Deputy Director, Internal Affairs Division, DOJ. The hum of the fluorescent light grew loud in the sudden silence. Keller's jaw dropped. Mason's lips parted, then closed in a thin line. Even the camera in the corner seemed to pivot, capturing the instantaneous recalibration of power. For the first time, every officer in the precinct felt the ground shift beneath them. The woman they'd thought powerless was the very architect of their accountability. Naomi remained motionless, cuffs glinting in the low light as the room collectively processed a stark new reality. Naomi's quiet ultimatum. Naomi leaned forward, wrist resting just above the table's edge. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of the department she led. "DOJ and Internal Affairs are watching this precinct," she said, each word steady. "Every file, every call, every bias complaint under audit. Let me walk out of here, and nobody else needs to be dragged into this. Otherwise, the consequences will reach far beyond these walls." The officers exchanged glances that flickered between defiance and dread. Dunlap's face paled, Torres's nervous tick reappeared. Even Keller stared, awestruck. The ultimatum hung between them like a guillotine blade. The choice was theirs, but failure to comply would unleash a cascade they could neither contain nor survive. In that moment, the precinct's narrative was rewritten not by cuffs or charges, but by the quiet assertion of a secret power few had suspected existed. Returned to the precinct. Naomi stepped out of interview room 2 and into the precinct hallway, and the atmosphere shifted like a tide pulling back from the shore. The same officers who had glared at her mere minutes ago now parted silently, their eyes flicking downward or darting sideways to avoid direct confrontation. No longer shackled, she walked with deliberate composure, each step echoing on the off-white linoleum tiles streaked with scuff marks. her blazer, slightly rumpled from hours of sitting, still carried the crisp authority of her position. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed in low anticipation, as though the building itself held its breath. Whispers died in mid-sentence when she passed. A young patrolman who had laughed with Dunlap in the break room now straightened his belt and averted his gaze. Behind her, the offices that had bustled with casual conversation fell into an uneasy hush. With every click of her heels, the power dynamic realigned. The woman they had underestimated was now the unspoken fulcrum upon which their fates teetered. The hallway, once hostile terrain, had become her runway, each measured footstep an unspoken declaration that Naomi Fields was in command of this domain. Captain's office reckoning at the far end of the corridor. Captain Mason's office door stood half open. Naomi paused just outside, straightening her posture and smoothing the lapels of her blazer. Inside, Mason sat behind his desk, face ashen, the thick file he had retrieved earlier sitting untouched before him. He rose slowly, folding his hands atop the mahogany surface, eyes flicking up to meet hers. As she entered, the door clicked softly shut behind her, the sound of punctuation mark on the chaos they'd unleashed. Naomi advanced to the desk, her gaze steady. "You run a clean department," she began, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Or at least that's what this city has been told." She placed her fingertips lightly on the file. Mason's lips pressed into a thin line. "I do," he managed, throw working. "Then, why were two of your own officers confident enough to plant evidence on a federal official in broad daylight?" Naomi's words cut through the stale office air like a blade. Mason inhaled sharply, the color draining further from his face. The desk lamp cast harsh shadows on his uniform, accentuating the lines of stress etched into his features. In that moment, the file once his to wield felt like a confession forced into his hands. The myth of his clean command lay in tatters on the desktop between them. The final 5 minutes warning. Just then, Naomi set the file down and turned toward the door, voice rising ever so slightly. "Officer Dunlap, Officer Torres, my office, now." The summons crackled through the hallway like gunfire. Outside, the sound of laughter from the break room flickered in, then snapped off entirely. A moment later, Dunlap swaggered in, still wearing the smug confidence that had served him so poorly so far. Torres followed, eyes darting between Naomi and the captain, uncertainty warping his once confident posture. Naomi's gaze locked onto Dunlap's. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a hush that carried across the room. "Enjoy your last 5 minutes before your career ends." The words landed with seismic force. Dunlap's smirk faltered, his bravado evaporating under her steely stare. Torres's foot shuffled on the carpet. Mason rose and gestured toward the door, voice clipped. "Close it." The click of the door shutting behind them sounded like a gunshot in the silent precinct. Outside that barrier of wood and glass, no one stirred. Inside, Naomi's warning hung in the charged air, a verdict more powerful than any gavel. Extraction by federal agents. A hush settled over the station as the dark-suited federal agents entered through the main lobby doors. Their polished badges caught the fluorescent glare like twin beacons. They moved with practiced precision, no swagger, no hesitation, just the quiet certainty of authority. Naomi met them in the hallway, her hands now unshackled but still resting loosely at her sides. The taller agent produced his credentials without a word. Naomi inclined her head, a brief acknowledgement of the unspoken camaraderie of those who wield true power. As they led her out, the precinct felt suspended in that moment, observers to the departure of someone who no longer belonged in a cell. Outside, the black SUV waited, its tinted windows reflecting the station's harsh lights. Naomi climbed in, every movement measured and dignified. The rear door closed with a soft thud that echoed the earlier interview room slam. As the SUV glided away under the dull afternoon sky, its presence silent but unmistakable, the precinct watched, the gravity of the moment sinking in. The detainee had become the one in charge, and their temporary triumph dissolved into thin air. Behind closed doors with the within the fortified glass walls of the federal buildings. Top floor. Conference room. The Attorney General and the Director of Internal Affairs awaited Naomi's arrival. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath recessed lights, offering an almost ceremonial stage. The AG rose as Naomi entered, folding his hands and regarding her with a mixture of respect and calculation. "Director Fields," he began, voice steady but edged with caution, "you've ignited a national scandal. The media will pounce, the politicians will posture, and the public will demand answers." He paused, eyes scanning the city skyline beyond the windows. Naomi took a seat without removing her coat, fixing him with a calm, unwavering stare. They fear justice, she replied softly, because they've never served it. Her words landed like a verdict in the hush room. The ag nodded slowly, folding his hands tighter. The Director of Internal Affairs leaned forward, sharp-eyed. Naomi's presence filled the glass-walled chamber, a living testament to the power of hidden truths brought into light. In that charged silence, one reality stood above all. The fight for accountability had moved from the shadows into the clear sight of those at the nation's helm, and nothing would ever be the same. Press conference recap. Bright lights flooded the room as Naomi Fields stepped to the podium, flanked by Department of Justice agents. Cameras flashed in rapid succession, live streams igniting across social media in real time. With unwavering composure, Naomi adjusted the microphone and fixed the crowd with a steady gaze. "This ends now," she declared, her voice echoing off the polished walls. In that single sentence, she distilled hours of injustice into a clear verdict. The officers who had planted evidence and abused their authority would answer for their crimes. She laid bare systemic corruption at the Bridgeport Police Department, calling out centuries-old biases that left Black and brown communities vulnerable to false accusations. Each phrase was precise, each pause charged with the weight of accountability. As she outlined the ongoing audit, the suspension of the prosecutor, and the full-scale investigation into bribery and coercion, the room fell into stunned silence only, to erupt moments later into a cacophony of camera shutters and shouted questions. Reporters leaned forward, producers whispered into headsets, and millions of viewers tuned in, compelled by the gravity of her revelations. By the time Naomi stepped away, the seal behind her glistened as a binding promise. Justice would no longer hide in the shadows. Emotional resonance and call to action. Have you ever felt powerless when you knew the truth? Naomi's story reminds us that courage often begins with a single act of defiance. In her fight, we see the power of one voice to challenge an entire system. If you've ever stood up when no one else would, whether confronting a bully, reporting wrongdoing, or lending support to someone in need, share your story in the comments. Hit like to amplify this message of accountability, and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of Naomi's crusade. Your engagement sends a clear signal. We refuse to turn away from injustice. Tease for next episode. The fallout has only just begun. Behind closed doors in Washington, federal auditors are combing through precinct records, high-profile indictments are being drafted, and powerful figures are bracing for exposure. Naomi Fields will face new challenges, personal sacrifices that test her resolve, and forces determined to protect the very corruption she's unmasked. Allies will emerge, betrayals will surface, and the battle for truth will escalate beyond city limits. Stay tuned, because when a hidden boss takes charge, no secret stays buried.